Lesson 10.1 on solids. This whole lesson is going to be filled with vocabulary, so get ready. It's going to be a long one. Now, polyhedrons. Polyhedrons are solids formed by polygons enclosing a single region of space. You'll notice with these drawings now, I'm no longer limiting myself to the second dimension. Rather, these objects are three-dimensional in nature. In Chapter 8, we studied a lot on area. Area is the space only in a two-dimensional surface, a flat space, but volume and the solids associated with volume in this chapter are filling up a three-dimensional space. So a polyhedron is a solid formed by polygons, triangles, squares, rectangles, enclosing a single region of space. In polyhedra, that's plural of polyhedron, we have different objects involved. The first object are faces. Faces are flat polygonal surfaces on any polyhedron. There's also edges. Edges are any segment where two faces intersect. Like, for example, either of these red highlighted edges here in these figures are indeed edges. And then there's also vertices, plural of vertex. And a vertex is any point where three or more edges intersect in a polyhedron. Vocabulary continues. Tetrahedrons. Now, a tetrahedron is a polyhedron with four faces. In fact, the only possible polyhedron that has four faces is one where every face is a triangle. Pentahedrons. A pentahedron with five faces. Hexahedron. A polyhedron with six faces. You'll notice a pattern forming here. Except for tetrahedron, which actually uses the prefix tetra instead of quad, all of the other polyhedra actually have prefixes that are the same as for polygons. Remember how an octagon is a polygon with 8 sides? Well, an octahedron is a polyhedron with 8 faces. A regular polyhedron is a polyhedron where every face is congruent to every other face. For example, in this, both the tetrahedron and the hexahedron that I have shown there, these are regular polyhedra because in the tetrahedron's case, all the triangles are congruent. Or in the hexahedron's case, all the faces are squares, which are congruent. Vocabulary continues. Prisms. Prisms are polyhedra with two congruent parallel polygons called bases. For example, in both these polyhedra shown, they're both prisms, and what I'm highlighting here in blue are the bases of the polyhedra. You can have a prism with triangular bases, you can have prisms with hexagonal bases, with octagonal bases. Any type of polygon can be a base in a prism. Now, in prisms, we have parts. One part are lateral faces. Lateral faces are the parallelograms connecting the corresponding sides of the bases. There are also lateral edges, which are the lines where the lateral faces intersect. And there are also different types of prisms based on their orientation. For example, the prism here on the left is a right prism because the two bases are perfectly, not only are they parallel to each other, but they also form right angles with the lateral edges. As opposed to here in this oblique prism, where the lateral faces are parallelograms, not rectangles. And so there, the lateral edges actually don't meet the edges of the bases at right angles. In addition, if we have oblique prisms, the height of an oblique prism is not measured at its slant height, but rather the distance between the bases, as shown there in the diagram. And the vocabulary continues. Pyramids. Pyramids are polyhedra with only one base. Now, in a pyramid, pyramids have lateral faces, they have edges, and they also have heights, just as with prisms. But there's also one additional part to a pyramid that a prism doesn't have, and that would be the vertex of the pyramid. And that's where all the lateral edges meet there, opposite the base. Also, there's a sphere. Now, a sphere is certainly different than the prisms or pyramids because prisms and pyramids have straight edges. But a sphere, think of a sphere as a three-dimensional circle. A sphere is a set of all points in space, not just on a flat surface or on a plane, but in space, that are at a given distance from a given point. Also, in a sphere, every sphere has a radius that is used as its distance of reference. And also that distance, that radius, has to be from a center of the sphere. In addition, a hemisphere is a half sphere and its circular base. Understand that a hemisphere is a solid enclosure. It's not like, don't think of it as hollow space, say for example like a bowl. Rather, think of it as a solid, complete enclosure. So a hemisphere is not only the half sphere, but including its circular base. And that vocabulary continues. Cylinders. Cylinders are solids with two congruent parallel circular bases. The equivalent of prisms, but with circles for bases instead of polygons. In cylinders, we have axes, and those are the lines running between the centers of the bases. And also cylinders, like prisms, can be right cylinders or could be oblique cylinders, depending upon whether or not the axis is actually forms a right angle with the bases or does not form a right angle with the bases. And here's the final vocabulary slide. Cones. Cones are solids with only one base and a curved surface. Think of a cone as a circular equivalent to a pyramid. And cones also certainly have their axes. They also have a vertex like pyramids do. Also, cones can be right cones or oblique cones, just like right cylinders or oblique cylinders, just like right prisms or oblique prisms. This concludes today's lesson.